Hello and welcome to episode 2, Stopping Pain, Insomnia, Anxiety, and Autoimmune Conditions. I'm your host, John Malanca, and I'd like to extend a special thank you to those who have shared our series. By sharing the series, you've taken the first step to improve the health and well-being of your loved ones and people all around the world. In episode 1, you saw the proof that deception, greed, and fear have been tools employed to leave the people confused and afraid about the sacred plant rather than being empowered. Today, coming up in episode 2, you will learn how the sacred plant treats autoimmune disease, pain, as well as addiction. You will meet patients who are using the sacred plant to reduce their intake of prescription drugs, and some of them are using cannabis to get off pharmaceuticals completely. In this episode, we'll explain how cannabis can help patients with Crohn's, MS, fibromyalgia, myasthenia gravis, chronic pain, insomnia, anxiety, depression, opioid addiction, as well as Lyme disease. You'll be amazed to see how the sacred plant can address so many of these conditions simultaneously in one patient. And many experts believe that cannabis could actually be the solution to the opioid epidemic that is taking thousands of lives.
I'm Elizabeth Crutchley. I'm 48.
Yeah.
I'm a mother, wife, daughter, and a cannabis patient. I have Crohn's, PTSD, chronic pain, and depression and insomnia. Mostly the Crohn's. So I was having flare-ups where it was putting me on the floor, and my daughter brought home some for me and said, "Mom, try it. I'm tired of seeing you in pain." I tried it. It was amazing. My whole body relaxed. I didn't have that always tensed up feeling and being in pain, and it just relaxed everything. And from then on, I was using, even though it was still illegal at the time, I still used it because it helped. I was on so much pain medicine. 23 years of narcotic pain medicine to where it shut my liver down. I spent a month in the hospital with a biliary bag because narcotics shut my liver down. Johns Hopkins, the best hospital in the world, had a trial going on where they slowly detox you off of the medicine. And I was at the point where the narcotics was making me hazy. And when I went through the detox at Hopkins, this reminded me.
So that's part of your history of...
That's part of my history. January 20th, 2015, I went inpatient to Johns Hopkins. And these are the people, initials, that I made close friendships there. We all were going through it. I'm the only one who has not gone back to it. One has gone back to using narcotics, and 2 of them have died because they went back to narcotics and overdosed. Oh, no. But with me, the cannabis, it's like this light and the sun came out. It sounds...
Hey.
But it gave me my life back. And now that it's legal here in my state, instead of going to a pharmacy and getting all the poisons, that was 15 pills twice a day.
So are you completely off pharmaceuticals altogether?
Except for 1 pill. And that's for Lamodal to control the Crohn's. Other than that, from 15 pills to 1.
And are you still having Crohn's breakouts, or are you...
Very, very rare.
Flare-ups, I should say?
Very, very rare, yes.
You mentioned Johns Hopkins, which I too believe it's a great institution. So do they know you're using cannabis?
Yes.
That's wonderful. And so what are their thoughts?
They can't technically recommend it, but the head of psychiatry, he's an old biker dude. He says, "I see a total difference in you." He goes, "You're smiling, you're walking." I used to walk with a cane and a walker. He goes, "You're walking, you're moving, you're talking, you're not having manic episodes, you're not in the bathroom all the time."
And
it works.
You're off of all the medications except one, so they must see that success.
Oh yeah. It's just, I had no life. And there was so much I wanted to do, and my kids were little. And I wanted to do so much with them, and they were used to, "Oh, Mom's whacked out on pain pills. Mom's in bed, you know.
So with your Crohn's, are you finding more success ingesting via smoking or vaporization, or
Ingesting.
Ingesting, yeah.
Ingesting, yes,
A lot
during
of the
the
Crohn's
day.
patients we work with do find more success with that as well.
Yeah, because it's given me a life.
Yeah.
And, you know, with the PTSD, if someone would close the door, you'd have to peel me off the ceiling. Or I couldn't have anybody touch my neck because I was strangled. Even doctors, I tell them, you can now touch my neck. I don't have that, you know, feeling. And it's nice.
Yeah.
It's very nice.
There's a lot of evidence that's looked at what happens in patients that have serious medical conditions to the rest of their quality of life. And some of these studies have, for example, looked at people with multiple sclerosis or cancer and then measured for secondary outcomes like anxiety, depression, quality of sleep, overall function, cognitive function. And what we see when we look at that data, which was reviewed last year in a paper by Zach Walsh out of British Columbia, that these domains are improving in people that are treated with cannabis. So less anxiety, less depression, better neurocognitive function, and better overall function. And a lot of people think, well, how can someone be using cannabis to treat a condition? Well, aren't they high all the time or stoned? And isn't their function becoming impaired? And that's obviously not the case. When cannabis is dosed appropriately and people are getting relief from their more severe symptoms, then these other outcomes are improving.
The problem really, if you were to look at organs and understand organs, that it's happening in the gut. The autoimmune, leaky gut, intestinal permeability, this is where all autoimmune disease is starting, right? This is really clear information, and it's ancient wisdom, and it's why ancient philosophers like Hippocrates said that all disease begins in the gut. That's true, let alone the fact that all autoimmune disease certainly begins in the gut. This is where it starts. The amazing power of cannabis is in that it helps to heal inflammation.
When I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease, that was, in my opinion, what was totally wrong with me 100%. But I quickly realized that this was considered a chronic, incurable disease, and that the progression was generally you would start to need to have intestines removed, and then eventually you have a coloscopy back. And I stayed away from support groups because having grown up in Hong Kong, I had some Eastern medicine understanding, and I wanted to explore that as well. It was in 20 years or 18 years of taking steroids, but not wanting to take steroids, so fighting the Western medicine regimen. At one point, they had me on 18 pills a day. And this was all Crohn's related. I wasn't diagnosed with the fibromyalgia until later. 2 months before I was scheduled for the colonoscopy, which was exploratory to see what they were going to cut out of me. I decided I better get my act together, and why not try what I had been espousing all of this time. And so I took quite a hefty dose, and this was before they could really separate the CBDs from the THC. And so for 2 months, I was quite altered. And after the colonoscopy, the doctor in the recovery room told me I wouldn't have known you had Crohn's if I didn't have your chart. And there was some, actually when I came to, they were rushing around seeing if they had the right chart, because he just couldn't believe that this was the same person. I had a completely normal colon with normal organ tissue that can uptake nutrients and do what the organ was meant to do. In my opinion, the oil completely cured me. Western medicine does not accept that you can be cured from Crohn's. They believe you can be in remission, but there's no cure. And so under their ideology, I'm in remission. But I know in my heart, I just know that it's cured. I guess want to emphasize that I owe my life to this plant. I owe my life to it. I certainly owe my quality of life to it if I don't owe my actual life to it, because this was my only option. There's a lot of people who have dual diagnoses, and are getting sicker off the medication that they're taking than the disease itself. I was taking 18 pills a day, and half of those were to deal with the side effects of the pills that I was taking. And so I went from 18 pills a day to 0 pills a day. I don't take any pharmaceutical drugs. And people who have the kind of problems I have, the psoriasis and the Crohn's and the stuff, tend to all have an underactive endocannabinoid system. And so it's logical and right to be feeding the system that has been throughout probably just generations has been, neglected, and there wouldn't be receptors if you're not supposed to use them, and there's so much wonderful help you get from it without all the terrible side effects that are in almost everything else.
There are people that have a lot to lose through the legalization of cannabis and the legalization of a lot of different plants that could have an impact on illness in ways that modern medicine has failed. There's a lot of money here. There's a lot of stakeholders. So it's not just about the protection of our kids, the protection of, the general public. It's about money. Don't ever make a mistake and think that it's not.
If you were to look at different conspiracies that are happening today that are very prevalent, you look at chronic pain, that there's 113 million people in America suffering from chronic pain, and that is costing this country over $600 billion just for chronic pain alone. And so then you have to then look at that relationship there and realize how big how much money is being channeled into this source. So now follow this money. So what do you understand about humanity? I mean, you're exposed to films and conversations and stories and history. What do you understand when that much money is being dealt with when it comes to somebody then coming and saying, hey, you don't actually have to take any of those drugs, you can actually do something else? What's going to then happen to those people that are saying you don't have to take those drugs? Well, then all of a sudden the conversation becomes not about the thing that we're talking about, it becomes about your personal character and how I can attack you for saying something that was attacking my pocket, right? And this huge multi-billion dollar corporations.
When you're prescribed a medication by your doctor, you have to understand that there's an enormous system of marketing that has deployed to get that medication in front of your doctor. And look, I used to be on this end. They would send in these pharmaceutical reps, just like, let's take you to dinner, let's buy you drinks. It was this whole system of just boozing and schmoozing the doctors to convince them that they should push your product. So there's a huge market-driven component to how medications get deployed through doctors' offices. And I'm not saying all of it is ugly and all of it is corrupt, but man, it is so entangled at this point that you always have to question any medication that you have been given. Look at the side effects and look at the complications and see if there's a generic or a natural alternative before committing yourself to a drug. It's not easy to get off of some of these drugs.
If I told you that just by prescribing that Percocet, I'm shutting off someone's respiratory center. I'm just putting a little bit of flavor in there to treat pain, but accidentally, if you get too much, you're going to stop breathing in the middle of the night. But I'm going to use, instead of that, some cannabis. And we're treating it as this alien plant, but I'm going to give you a medicinal amount of cannabis. It's going to treat your pain equally as well, but you're not going to die in the middle of the night. Which one are you going to choose? Why should we have so many hoops to jump through to give you something that's going to help? Why should we struggle giving you a medication? I just don't understand that. And yes, I do think everyone should have access. I think that it should be easy to prescribe. I think that doctors should be educated, nurses, everyone in the field should be educated. I think that there are a bunch of really beautiful studies to share. I will say this though, I will not claim it cures anything, but it's an option, it's a treatment. And if this treatment prevents another complication, then we served our purpose. Do no harm was what I was taught.
In 2008, actually June 1st, I won't forget it, I woke up and couldn't use half of my body. It was like it wasn't even there. It was invisible. Went to the hospital and they said I'd had a stroke. A month and 3 days later, I had another one and ended up in a wheelchair. told from the doctors, that's it. This is your new life. So I had to give up my truck driving license, and I ended up being just basically sitting around the house, taking pills, and my health kept going downhill. And they kept testing with spinal taps and this and that. And then one doctor came up and says, does MS run in your family? I'm like, yes, it does. And that's when they tested me for it, and there it is, And, they also said I had fibromyalgia at about the same time. They noticed that, and I've gone from having injections in my spine to, like I said, the pills. And anybody who's going through pain, their biggest thing is it's maybe sounds sexist, but a lot of guys want to take care of their families. And women do the same thing, but for a guy that has always took care of his family, I was the breadwinner. My wife stayed home. I did. Now I'm the breadwinner again, you know what I'm saying? It feels invigorating, alive. And that's where I feel now, is that I came from being dead and a zombie to I'm alive again. And I'm functioning and doing what I want to do.
One of the most common conditions that we're able to treat well using cannabis is multiple sclerosis. It is very, very common throughout the United States and in New Hampshire, and it is a very, very challenging condition to deal with. It has a large number of symptoms. Some of the worst include things like spasticity or muscle tension, and that is something that we make great headway into. Cannabis does a great job of relaxing the muscles and allowing our patients to receive, to get proper use of their muscles so they can exercise, keep their flexibility up, and really just maintain their lifestyle and be able to function. It makes a huge difference.
Scientifically, I learned something from clinical trials of multiple sclerosis and Sativex. And you look at some of this data with that 1-to-1 spray of cannabis, THC and CBD, there was about a third, in some of these studies, about a third of patients really drove the data that really responded well. Some others didn't get that great of an effect, but about a third of those MS patients responded really well. They had tremendous relief of their symptoms, much better quality of life. And that third of people tended to be those that were really resistant to other treatments. They hadn't found as much relief in other things, and cannabis really worked for them. There are people that would be very great responders therapeutically and get their quality of life back, or the best they can, by using this natural medicine. And to not allow them the opportunity to try it is criminal, and it has been for a long time. And to allow them to try it early on, before they try more expensive, more toxic, more controversial treatments, should be something that's right in the front conversation with physicians. Before you start going down the routes of medicines that are going to cost thousands of dollars a week and might cause really serious side effects, have the conversation about, have you tried cannabis yet, to see if you might be somebody who really benefits from it. I think that's important.
I get to have a life with my kids again. I chase my kids around the house and play with them like a father should. Where before I sat on the couch and that was my life. And half the conversations I probably couldn't even tell you the truth to remember. Now we have conversations, I remember them, and I give them a hard time later about it. It's a joy. And that's because of the medical program. And it works. And I'm back to work. I'm doing 40 plus hours a week. And I get upset if I don't get my 40 hours a week, because I love working now. So it's just going from a zombie to life. There's not really any way you can explain it better than that.
What I see all the time in my patients who have been here for 2 or 5 or 8 years using cannabis under my supervision, they're using less and less over time typically. They're making healthier choices in their life. They're getting in touch more with what they need to do from a lifestyle perspective and from a way of relating to their inner self and relating to their family and their community. They're making those shifts. I think some of that is certainly augmented by the cannabis state of consciousness, which helps people disengage and see things from a new perspective. And they're getting healthier. You know, there's too many factors involved to attribute all of their improvement to the cannabis, but I'm sure in so many cases that the cannabis is the tipping point that enables them to no longer be buried by their symptoms and by their suffering and their disability, and to actually get out of bed, to get back into the community, to be able to focus enough to learn some new things that could help them, to engage with their families and the people around them, and especially to get back to meaningful work. Now, this is something that I didn't see when I was in my training in family medicine. Very many people that were on disability actually going back to work after starting some type of a medical treatment. Very unusual in medicine. We see this a lot. People actually, they're sick of being disabled, right? They want to get back on their feet and get back to work for financial incentives and for other incentives. And what I've observed is that there is almost no more powerful of a medicine than meaningful work in someone's life. We think the sacred plant is great. It is great. Love is also a good medicine. Connection with people, that's great. But meaningful work can take someone and make everything about their life better. And so it's such a critical milestone when people get better enough to go do something, even if it's just volunteering for a few hours a week or helping out their neighbor, or maybe it's going back to a full-time job. But this is huge for people. I see that cannabis supports this. They can continue using cannabis while they're working. It doesn't have to be impairing. It can actually enhance their performance, enhance their focus when they use it in the right way.
They need this in every state, not just selected ones. Everybody needs this program. Everybody needs to know what it's like to get up and not suffer, and get up and have a life and enjoy everything around them. I mean, I had to take so many pills a day. I had to have a machine tell me each time of day to take my meds. An alarm would go off each time of the day. And when you've got 12 alarms going off to take pills, what's the point? With the medical marijuana program, if I start hurting, I can go to the bathroom anywhere, put 2 drops of that tincture that they make under my tongue, and guess what? I'm right back out there with my family, and nobody ever knew nothing. It ain't about smoking to get high. It's taking this to live.
David Patton is a patient of Dr. Dustin Sulak's in the state of Maine. In episode 5, we'll be looking at different medical cannabis programs state to state. We've just heard about Crohn's, MS, and fibromyalgia. What I find so amazing about this plant is how it can treat so many symptoms at once. Let's go to Greenbridge Medical in Los Angeles to see Dr. Alan Frankel, who appeared in season 1 of our first series.
Myasthenia gravis is a complex neurological disorder. It also falls into the mito diseases, the mitochondrial diseases. And these are patients that can present, usually young adults to older, it usually starts with double vision. They have weakness of number of eye muscle groups. It's a disease related to the energy production of muscles by the mitochondria. And we think that's why THCA helps. Well, tell me your results.
Yeah, mine were incredible. I mean, it was what was most interesting to me about how quickly I felt better. I just think that I started to feel a little bit better after a week, and then maybe by the second week I was driving again and able to see. I hadn't driven for 2 years, and living in Los Angeles and working is, commuting from the valley was quite a challenge. So it was a miracle for me. It really changed my life. back.
I mean, this is partly my ego talking, but tell me what people in your family and friends and were saying.
Everyone is, it's amazing. There's still a little bit of resistance, and people don't know what CBD is, and they think that, they get high, you're going to get high by taking it, and I didn't experience any of that. It really felt like all it did was make my eyes like they were before.
And do they feel 100% normal to you?
Occasionally, I'll have little dips. If I'm
very tired, or
yes,
a little
tired.
fever, infection.
If I have a sore throat, or occasionally there are times where I'll have to even I'll just adjust my dosage and take an extra dosage, and I feel better.
I generally, as a general rule, if somebody has a infection or stress, fever, I tell them until that's over, double their CBD.
Yeah. Well, with my job, there's a lot of stress, so I should just double dose every day.
Double dose. So what are you taking every day? I'm
taking 3 times a day. I'm taking the CBD that's a 2-to-1 ratio. And
number 4.
Yes, and the THC acid. Both of those, I take it 3 times a day usually. So occasionally, if I'm feeling a little under the weather, I might take an extra dose, or if I have a particularly long day, because I can, just start to feel a little weakness in my eyes, and even before it goes double. So it never gets to that point.
So you had the diplopia, double vision, and the droopy eyelids.
I did. I had 1 droopy eyelid. It was very odd. I think maybe if you have 2 droopy eyelids, they might think I had bad skincare or something. But 1, it was very obvious. And a lot of people would notice it. It was like the first thing. 3 weeks later, people were walking up to me and saying, your eyes look great. So...
They probably thought you had plastic surgery.
No, they knew. They knew. When you're arriving in an Uber every day to every meeting, it's, you got to be very open about your ailments.
It's so easy for us, or for me even, to forget how even some double vision, let alone, changes your whole life.
It does. And I'm in the beauty industry, so it's, you're already... the bar's high on, and you're, I'm aging, and I'm...
No, you're not. You're not. With CBD, you're reversing. I'm 127 years old.
Really? Yeah, wow, you look great.
I look great.
I want to have what you're having.
You are. Fibromyalgia is very, very common, not as exciting as somebody from with myasthenia gravis, but fibromyalgia, I've always felt, is a disease of disordered sleep.
Yeah.
If you look back and talk to them about what was going wrong first, it was some sleep disorder. So I usually treat them with CBD during the day and add a little THC at night, just get them to sleep better. Yeah. And with sleep disorders, I break them down into 2 types, just very briefly. The people who have trouble falling asleep and the people who have trouble staying asleep. The people who have trouble staying asleep have elevated cortisol levels during the day and the night, almost always from anxiety. And then their cortisol levels that are the early morning elevations of cortisol wake them up. So instead of waking up at 6 or 7, they wake up at 1, 3, 4 in the morning, very agitated, difficult to go back to sleep. If you give them a sleeping, let's say a sleeping concoction of cannabis, sleeping pills, don't work. They still wake up at in the early morning, and then they're groggy. If you give them CBD during the day, you treat their anxiety, and you can pretty much then not give them very much at nighttime, just deal with it during the day. But the MG patient, to me, this is still one of my most exciting because, the cancer patients are very rewarding, and we're pretty sure we're having substantial impact. And now there are clinical trials, thank God, backing that up. But with patients like yourself, you just put them on something, and in a week, they're better. It's like,
and I was on the Muron and prednisone and all those things that were wreaking havoc and causing other problems.
Will eventually kill you.
Yeah.
Dr. Frankel will join us again in episode 3 when we show how the sacred plant works for autism and epilepsy. As we all know, millions of Americans are prescribed narcotics every day, including young children. These opioid medications quickly become drugs of abuse, and many victims end up turning to street heroin when they're unable to fill their prescriptions. How could it be that these drugs, which are killing hundreds of people every single day, are 100% legal when the sacred plant's not? I sat down with Dr. Patricia Fry in Maryland to talk about this epidemic and how she is helping her pain patients avoid dangerous opioid addictions. Are you enjoying the show so far? Are you learning a lot of great information? Do you want to join our movement and support our mission to inform the world on the truth about cannabis? Then please consider supporting our cause by owning this complete series so you can watch it again and share it with a loved one now or in the future. Your support allows us to continue researching the sacred plant and spreading our findings for free. Also, a portion of each sale gets donated to charities that are helping people every day to find relief for their pain and to change the unjust laws so people everywhere can access the plant legally to heal. Simply click the banner below to join the movement and to support our mission. I thank you in advance. It's people like you who are truly helping to change the world.
Cannabis will potentiate the pain relieving effect of oxycodone or any opiate or opioid for that matter. And so I have found that if you start with very small amounts, and they can take it, they can take the opioid at the same time they're using the cannabis, but what they're going to find is that they're not going to need as high a dose of the opioid because the cannabis will decrease that dose, the need of that dose by 60-75%. Almost every single chronic pain patient I've seen, and that's what I see like 40% of this practice is chronic pain, and they will automatically find that they can get the same pain relief, if not better pain relief, with 60-75% reduction in that opioid dose. And then that translates into feeling better and avoiding a lot of the adverse effects from the opioids. And the biggest one for most people, the most miserable one, is the constipation.
Yeah. Now you have a pill for that, opioid-induced constipation pill.
I know, they just need to back off the opioid and use a little cannabis. But the cannabis will potentiate the pain relieving effect of the opioid by interacting with those opioid receptors. So it helps in that. The other reason why it helps with pain relief from the opiate is because after not too long, you get into what we call opioid-induced hyperalgesia, which is a long medical term for meaning that the opioid is actually increasing your pain.
The reason that cannabis is helpful in terms of dealing with pain, I think, is at least twofold. One is that it slows down or decreases the frequency of pain stimuli that are being transmitted to your brain because it slowed the speed of neurotransmission. The other thing is that there are at least two pain interpretation centers in the brain. One that's mediated by your endorphins, your opiate-like molecule that your body makes, and the other one that's mediated by the endocannabinoids. So by increasing the amount of cannabinoids from an exogenous source that is outside your body, you're slowing down the speed of neurotransmission, and you're also influencing the pain interpretation center in the brain. And we know that from research that's been done and from other specialists in cannabinoid medicine, that most patients who have pain that try cannabis are able to decrease their dose of opiates by 30 to 50%, and in some cases not use it at all.
It was really important to me to be able to decrease the opioids. I decreased them by 75%. So I went from taking a really high dose to a much lower dose, and I'm still working on that. But it's getting there, you know. I have more of a chance to be healthy because of it. And it wasn't an option before, like it wasn't legal in this state till recently, you know. It was great to know when I had decreased it so low, and then the Oxycontin I was on like 80 milligrams, and I went down to 10. It really helps with pain, and I think, you know, people should have access to it, and they should be aware of it, you know, aware of all the good that it can do.
So I just want to talk a little bit about the opioid epidemic because I have some thoughts on it, and they may not be exactly what everybody else thinks. But first of all, when I talk about the opioid epidemic, I always like to say that to anybody that's lost a loved one to opioid overdose, my heart goes out to you. It's affected my family, friends. I've had friends in my family that I cared very deeply about that have experienced it. And so I've seen it firsthand that people overdose and die of opioids. But two things. Number one, you cannot have a war on opioids and not safe access to cannabis. Because what happens to people that are in chronic, life-limiting pain when they have nothing to take for it anymore? What happens to them? And who makes that decision? Is it the people that are in horrible pain that make that decision? Or is it the people that are observing the trends and make that decision? Clearly, there's a reason why we now have an opioid epidemic, and I don't have any answer to that. But I do know that the pathophysiology of pain is that pain is the response to an injury. From the injury, it travels up your spinal cord and you receive it in your brain. What opioids do very well is they kind of nix that reception of pain in your brain. And yes, people can say pain is good, but not pain that goes on and on and on and on. And what happens is if you have pain that lasts more than 3 months and then lasts more than 6 months, the body starts putting down more neurons to receive the pain. And I learned this at a pain seminar because I went to pain seminars in hospice. And the body gets so what happens is not only did you receive the initial pain, but you're receiving more pain signals. And that's when the use of opioids was very effective. And chronic pain is a problem because they try and use anti-seizure drugs to mitigate chronic pain. They use antidepressants to mitigate chronic pain. And there's really nothing helpful for chronic pain. And there are people that live in terrible, terrible chronic pain. And the problem I have is that if they wipe off all opioids, but they don't have legal, easy access to cannabis, what's going to happen to all those people? What's going to happen to everybody that's in pain?
One of the great benefits of cannabis is its ability to reduce and or eliminate pain, and that's one of the biggest issues that people have. You know, in all my career, we're working with formulas and things. It's like 1 out of 4 people are experiencing pain at some point or another. So it's a huge unmet issue in our society. And the way it's being met now is with opiates and opioids, the prescription opioids. And so much so it's considered a national emergency. And I think rightfully so, because when people are doing the opioids, they go to the doctor, they're in pain, what can I get? And they're trained to, I mean, I'm not saying these people have an evil intent. They're trying to help the people, and this thing actually will help alleviate pain. But when they get the opioids and they start doing it, it alleviates the pain. It's very easy to become addicted to that. When they stop doing it, the pain comes back, so they keep doing it. Then after a while, they're addicted, and it affects the physiology and the emotions. It affects everything. Everything we ingest into our body expresses itself and affects our whole physiology. So what happens is that when they get addicted, then they're not the same person they used to be. They don't have the same interests they used to have. It affects maybe their job performance. They may end up losing their job. They may end up losing their family. I mean, it's a tragedy. And the beauty of cannabis is it can relieve that pain, but you're still conscious and aware and functioning. In every state where there's been adult use, the prescription opioids have dropped by 20% or more. And the admissions to hospital for opioid-related issues have also dropped.
What marijuana allows me to do is it allows me to moderate my pain in a way that I otherwise wouldn't be able to. And what I mean by that is pain for me, how I experience it, it's very immediate. It's very overwhelming, and marijuana helps me to create a kind of a psychological buffer where I can get a handle on it and manage it from within, as opposed to just being victimized by my own body. And that's what I like about it. And that's the clarity I never had with the opiates, because by nature, they're there to kind of subdue everything. And for me, the answer to really living with pain long term is cooperative, collaborative. It's really coming to an agreement with your body and how you and your body move forward. And marijuana is nice in the sense that it allows collaborativeness. It does not impose.
And that's why cannabis is such a God-given plant, in my opinion, because it is also looking at not only relieving the symptom, but it's looking at the core of the problem, which is an incredible thing. And a lot of people aren't quite aware of all the medicinal qualities of how it's healing the body. And this is why we're getting into the understandings of the endocannabinoid system, because we can see how it's going into areas of the body, the brain, inflammation in the body, and helping to repair that damage. And its side effect is actually the pain relief, right? Which is incredible. That's the side effect. You're getting the pain relieved, but the core thing that's actually happening, even if it wasn't your reason why you decided to take cannabis, it's helping to heal the core of that problem. That's what's beautiful about it. Drugs never, ever, ever heal the core of the problem. Not pharmaceutical, synthetic drugs, they never heal the core of the problem. They're only ever treating disease and relieving symptoms at best, and they're typically coming with other diseases attached to them, which is an excellent upsell program from Big Pharma.
Then recently, medical marijuana became legal here, and my primary care suggested I try using cannabis to get off of the oxys. And while I was waiting for the paperwork, I did some research and some blogs, reading up on different people who had taken oxys for various other reasons, but were able to get off of it with pretty much, ease compared to just going cold turkey. And I've only been doing it for about a month and a half now, and I would normally have 2 weeks of just being miserable with sweats and chills and agitation and discomfort. I would stay in the house for 2 weeks, and the first time doing it, I was out doing various things and shopping and a little bit of stuff in the garage, and without any real side effects. Maybe 20% of the issues that I would normally have.
Several key facts. America is the capital of opioid use, legal opioid use. We probably suck up 70 to 80% of all the opioids produced in the world. And if you speak out against it, you find that those people often get silenced real quick. And here is Colorado and California, where just the pharmaceutical sales of opioids dipped 80%. Just that alone should be breathtaking. So here I am on the administrative side trying to design programs to help with addiction and trying to help people with infections, trying to get people to do better. And here in California and Colorado, the whole time that I'm working on these programs and we're not making any headway, they did it with just legalizing cannabis. So my friends out there who don't understand, they just don't understand what this means. This means the act of giving a person an alternative to what they're normally using, just to basic opioids and benzodiazepines, things that to this day kind of take my breath away. Here we are prescribing something we were told was safe. We were told time and time again will help with pain and anxiety, yet in return has cost the U.S. it's cost our nation lives. It's cost our nation lives, families, people. You can't put a price on all that.
I would say it does influence addiction in a whole variety of ways, and it tends to be a way to exit out of addiction and mitigate addictive habits with other drugs.
What is the dependency risk of cannabis? Well, if we take a look at the work of two well-known addictionologists, Henningfield and Benowitz, they took a look at 5 or 6 recreational drugs: alcohol, heroin, tobacco, cocaine, coffee, and cannabis. The one that had the least dependency risk was cannabis, less than coffee. Can people die from marijuana? No. Can people die from coffee? Yes. If you go on the internet, you'll see that there were probably a couple of deaths in the United States last year from an overdose of caffeine. I know when I was in New Zealand that there was a report of an overdose death from caffeine. So caffeine is more dangerous than cannabis. So as soon as somebody starts talking about, well, cannabis is dangerous, say, well, are you going to talk about caffeine and the dangers that are inherent with caffeine?
I was never really aware of the fact that I was addicted to pharmaceuticals. And it really took me to the point where I had moved to Florida and I was doctor shopping to get Adderall. Some days using upwards of 300 milligrams of Oxycontin a day. It was a roller coaster ride. I didn't, really understand what I was doing to myself. I really had no clue. I just thought it was okay because the pills were prescribed from the doctor. And doing a substance abuse program while incarcerated is really, I think, what changed flipped the switch inside my head and said, I can't live like this anymore. But when I moved home, I was able to use cannabis to replace all of it, which is, basically, where I'm at now is only cannabis. Getting my medical card has kept me away from all the people that use pharmaceutical drugs. So when it comes down to it, there's no longer a gateway to street drugs. When I came back, I met Dr. Sulak approximately about a month after I arrived home. And for the sheer fact of the matter is I was in pain. And I didn't want to break the law. And, my parents had told me, basically, you're just gonna go back on other drugs and, da-da-da-da-da. The whole gateway theory was in my parents' head. And I told them I was gonna prove them wrong. And to this day, I still am completely sober off pharmaceuticals and street drugs. And I don't think a lot of people understand what severe depression is and what it does to your body, but it brings, it makes you feel very weighted and, not able to do things that are, a normal person can do. And, as soon as, everyday cannabis use was, administered, my life completely did a 180. It was, it's quite incredible to look back at it. And there was points in time where I thought I was going to be a drug addict my whole life. Now using cannabis, if I go a day without my medicine, I'm in some pain, but I don't ever have any withdrawal symptoms or anything like that. I don't never feel the need where I'm going to die if I don't use, And I think that's the big difference, is the physical addiction that other drugs create. Cannabis just doesn't have. And when the side effects become worse than the original reason why you're using that medicine, then it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to continue using that medicine. And, it just took me a long time to realize that. But, most of it was because I had a prescription from the doctor and I justified it in my head. Everybody needs to know about the sacred plant because it's the most healing plant on earth. And, unfortunately, through unjust laws, it was made illegal. This should be a first treatment rather than a last treatment. And, for me, this plant being the sacred plant, it gave me my life back, and that's medicine.
So a lot of patients come in with the specific intention of getting off of some medication or some list of medications. And typically that's driven by side effects, feeling addicted or dependent on the medication, and also just a plain old lack of efficacy. These meds aren't working, but people keep taking them because some of them, when they stop, they get withdrawal symptoms or rebound symptoms, and some they just don't have any other solution. And so they feel like they have to keep taking these medications. So this is very common in my medical practice, and I'm sure that there's some selection bias here, meaning that the types of patients that come to me are the types that are really determined to reduce their medication list. So this is something I help them do. It's very safe to add cannabis to most medications. There's a small handful of contraindications. For example, warfarin or Coumadin, the blood thinning agent, that has to be watched when someone takes cannabis. But for most of the medications that cannabis can replace, like pain drugs, antidepressants, anti-anxiety drugs, different types of drugs that affect the nervous system for seizures or spasticity. These classes of drugs typically don't interact with cannabis, so that you can add the cannabis in before removing the other drugs, and you can do so slowly and methodically in a sequence that makes sense for the patient. And then when they're finally off of them, they're free of those rebound or withdrawal symptoms because they've got cannabis on board that's helping kind of soften that transition. This is something we do a lot of.
My wife and I had a severe car accident in 1990 that left me on a large amount of pharmaceuticals, and it didn't leave me with any direction. There wasn't any place to go, any further to go, except for a pain pump or that type of pain management, which I really didn't want to do. So that led me on a quest for more natural medicines, and one of them happened to be cannabis. And like I said, I didn't buy that for a second. It really took about a year of research before I would even consider trying it. Being clean and sober for 6 years, I didn't want to risk my wife, my family, my friends, or anything to save my health over a plant that was illegal or considered illegal. It was legalized in 1999 here, and this was in 2002. I started using it in 2002, but not with a lot of direction. Some tinctures, some edibles and things like that for pain management. But it wasn't until I met Dr. Dustin Sulak and his guidance on how to use the plant to get off from the actual medications that I'd been on for so many years that it changed my life. And that's what brings me here today, and my commitment and belief behind what this plant does for people.
We came to meet with Dr. Sulak, and he worked with Glenn on acupuncture and osteopathic manipulations. And then he happened to mention, have you thought about cannabis? Well, I being a dare mom and Glenn being a recovering alcoholic, that immediately set me off. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Did you not read his file? That, this is not a good thing for him. He has addictive personality. And Dr. Sulak said, he's been using pharmaceuticals all these years. He's physically dependent on those. And it's no different. And cannabis can replace that naturally without injuring his liver. So it might be worth giving it a try. And he tried to explain that to me. I really wasn't open to hearing it. We had 2 teenage kids, and all I could think of was, oh my God, this is gonna make him drink again. And so he started getting access to tinctures and non-smokable forms, which I hadn't seen, in the past. I figured that you had to just smoke it to get high. And the tinctures weren't necessarily making him high. Now he did end up smoking and vaporizing and using many different methods. His friend had told him that it took more than just one way to really be therapeutic. So what he started doing, I love to cook, and I'm in the kitchen a lot, and we tend to do everything together. So he'd bring over different plant materials and teach me how to make tincture and how to make butter and how to cook with it. We make lozenges. And I started seeing improvement in his, he had really severe spasms from the car accident that we were in. And those started to diminish. His pain levels started to come down, and Dr. Sulak, it took about a year, but Dr. Sulak was able to wean him down off from all of his medications. He was on anti-seizure drugs, muscle relaxants, pain relievers. He was on over 9 different prescriptions at one time, and it had changed him. He really was a prisoner to these pharmaceuticals that, you know, everywhere we went, he had this little duffel bag that he carried that had all his prescriptions because he couldn't go without them, or he'd risk having a seizure or having extreme pain and not being able to get around. And after a year, we saw such improvement. He was off all his pharmaceuticals that we started looking into this as just a lifestyle change. And instead of it being the last resort, we're reaching for that first. You know, instead of going for Tylenol and ibuprofen or the pharmaceuticals they give after surgeries, go for cannabis. It needs to be a first go-to instead of a last resort. With our addiction recovery patients, you know, they come to us after they've tried Suboxone or methadone or whatever. Instead of doing this first, they go to another addictive substance. There's no exit strategy. That's what we can provide them with the cannabis. We want this to be a mainstream.
We had one patient that was 14 years at the methadone clinic. 14 years with no exit strategy, at maximum dose. He's not on methadone anymore. He's totally clean. He doesn't take anything.
6 months is all it took. And he's working and doing well and back.
Never felt better in his life.
One of the blessings of the sacred plant is that it gives people with addiction issues a holistic way to manage pain and chronic illness without risking relapse. Sarah, a patient of Dr. Sulak, and his wife Danielle Sad, is facing this challenge.
My name is Sarah Siegel, and I'm a person who's in long-term recovery. I have over a decade clean from heroin addiction, although I used to call myself a garbage can addict because it was pretty much whatever I could get, however much of it. But opiates was my, heroin in particular was my drug of choice. I'm an ordained interfaith minister. I was ordained through the Chaplaincy Institute of Maine in 2013. I have 3 kids, 12, 9, and 3 are their ages. And I also have Lyme and Babesia, and I've been a medical cannabis patient for the past 2 years now. When I was 21, that was my first time being exposed to recovery, and so that was the first clean time that I had. However, after that, for 3 or 4 years, I was on methadone, a lot of methadone. And I had my first child on methadone. He was born dependent on methadone. It was through working the 12 steps in AA, actually, that I finally kind of began my really plugging into the possibility that my life could be different. Well, I found myself struggling, and this is many years after first recovering from heroin and making my way into active recovery. I found myself struggling with some nebulous condition that Western medicine really wasn't able to identify. And it was a really scary time in my life because as somebody in long-term recovery, I was having a lot of pain. And the only options that were being given to me at the time were either just suffering through it or going back on opioids of some kind, and which was just something I was really unwilling to do. The condition ultimately has turned out to be still, there's a question mark to some degree on it, but it's highly likely that what I have is chronic Lyme and babesiosis. And my primary care doctor just told me it was stress and insisted that I needed to go on antidepressants and get a prescription for Ativan. Psychiatrists I saw also thought that it was stress. None of them supported any sort of alternative therapies like cannabis. And so it wasn't really until I connected with Dr. Sulak that I really even entertained the possibility that there was that there was another reason for my suffering, although kind of deep down, what they were saying to me just didn't feel right. My symptoms of Lyme and Babesia really have manifested in the form of a lot of chronic pain, and as well as anxiety and a lot of other really confusing symptoms. Heavy fatigue, feels like I'm just kind of dragging my body around. And stress, my ability to kind of metabolize stress just went out the window, it seemed, when I got sick with Lyme and Babesia. My insomnia was the very first symptom that I really noticed was relieved with cannabis. Once I found the right strain, and the dispensary helped me with that, it wasn't very hard. I think it was the second one that I tried. I was able to sleep without any of the medication that I'd been taking. Cannabis also has really helped with just the widespread body pain that I feel, muscle pain and joint pain. Without it, there have been many days where I've not been able to take care of my children when I was really sick with Lyme and Babesia. We had to hire people to watch our kids, and my husband had to miss time at work, and I was really bedridden in the worst of it. But once I really got on the right regimen with cannabis, I was able to, have my life back. Definitely, so I'm smoking and taking tinctures, every few hours. But then I can do that for a week, I can do that for 2 weeks, I could do that for 3 weeks, and then I can just walk away. If I wake up one morning and I'm feeling good, I don't need cannabis, and I have 0 side effects. And to me, that's such a gift. And I don't know why, in this country, I don't understand why it's classified in the same category as heroin. That makes no sense to me, because it has none of the same effects that heroin has. You do not have the physical dependency, so it's really wrong. I mean, people are dying left and right. I just buried my nephew 3 days ago because of heroin, and we've got to start using all of the tools that we have. If my story can help people, then I really want to be sharing it, because people need to know that you can recover, you can heal. There's no right way or wrong way to be in recovery. For too long, the conversation has been dictated, it's really polarized into these kind of black and white options. You're either doing 12 steps, or you're doing medically assisted, something like Suboxone or Methadone, and if you're doing cannabis, then you're not in recovery at all. That's kind of been the way that the story has been up until now, and it's really time for it to change. We're at the point with this crisis where we just can't afford to shove people into boxes anymore because of our own discomfort, or because of the things that we don't understand, because of our own fear.
I want to thank you for watching episode 2 of the Sacred Plant Healing Secrets Examined. I hope you come away with a better understanding of how the Sacred Plant works to treat autoimmune diseases, pain, addiction, and much, much more. Our mission is to educate you on the secrets of the Sacred Plant and to alleviate suffering for you and your loved ones. Please share this series widely with their family and friends so that they can become empowered to take control of their health. Be sure to tune into episode 3, Ending Suffering for Our Children, Autism, Seizures, and More. This next episode is truly one of the most powerful in our series. These are stories about children who cannot be helped by Western medicine, but found true healing with the Sacred Plant. We will share the stories of Joey, Bryce, Gavin, and Sawyer, all severely autistic children who are not able to speak or learn until they tried this miracle plant. These children are now able to function at a level that their parents and doctors never imagined was possible. You will meet the Maddox family, who contacted me at United Patients Group. Their son Sawyer was having hundreds of seizures a day. Since I suggested that they come to California and meet with Dr. Frankel, Sawyer has been seizure-free for over 3 years. Susan will share her story of her daughter Cindy May, whose epilepsy was so severe that she was wheelchair-bound. Susan moved to Maine to work with Dr. Dustin Sulak and finally found some relief for her daughter. The stories in episode 3 will truly astonish you, so definitely don't miss it. I invite you to join our movement, support our mission, and help us save lives. We're a small company that's committed to the truth and to helping humanity. Since we don't have the unlimited resources that Big Pharma has, we need to work together to educate and empower more people about the healing benefits of the Sacred Plant. When you support our mission by owning the complete series today, you allow us to continue to research, interview, expose, and share this knowledge with the world for free, just like we're doing right now. If you learned something, been inspired, want to watch it again, share it with a loved one, or just love how it feels to support a good cause, consider owning the Sacred Plant Healing Secrets Examined today. Simply click the banner below to join the movement and support our mission. I thank you in advance. It's people like you who are truly helping to change the world.